Hey guys, thanks for watching. The best way to support the show is to go into the description as well as the pinned comment. There is a locals, there's a Patreon with daily behind the scenes videos. There's also a PayPal, a Cash App, and a Buy Me a Coffee. All good ways to support. Most of you guys support in the $3 to $5 a month, which is amazing. The big three revenue streams are YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify, and those can and will fluctuate wildly and sometimes outright cancel me. The show needs about $5,000 a month to run. Right now, it's making about $1,500 from fans alone. I want to get that up to 5,000 a month so that the big three can go pound sand and the show can remain independent. The show does take money. It's just what it is. If you can only donate $1 a month, that is awesome. So if you could, please think about it. Go in there. If you want something else, there's also Sport Drink. That link is in the description. You can use promo code TPC for 10% off or promo code Tommy's Podcast, as well as Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. And if you can't do any of that, I would ask that you go to ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. It's a group of special forces guys from 1993 till now, and they rescue about 10 or 11 kids every single year who are sex trafficked. They physically go and rescue them. So if you have to support one thing, I'd ask that you please support them. They are literally saving the lives of children. Um, Thank you so much. There we go. And we are recording on Saturday, March 6th at 12:06 p.m. Eastern Time with Miss Susan Kokinda, Colonel Watkins, and Colonel Luongo. And I will say, with the first time or the second time I had you on, Susan, I had put Colonel Kokinda, and very
I
naturally,
didn't know the joke.
naturally, you're like, I just don't want to disrespect her. And I had taken that for granted. I think the first time I had on maybe Colonel Watkins with Tom, I'd accidentally made him a
Right.
colonel, and then it became a running meme. Anyone on with Colonel Watkins is now a colonel,
Right.
and I had met you maybe once before, so I was like Colonel Kokinda, and you were like, what is
Yeah.
that? And I was like,
What is this all about?
I should have
Second
explained.
Louis, maybe, but
No,
See, as
I
long
was like,
as, see, Tommy, you can call me anything you want as long as you don't call me doctor.
well, Doctor Luongo, astronaut, doctor, professor.
Oh,
Um,
please, no.
yeah,
Yeah, no. I have too much respect for myself to call myself the PhD.
fair enough. Well, I was gonna say, ladies first. Susan, where would you like us to jump into this?
well, actually, I think I reviewed the national security strategy that came out in December over the last 24 hours. And it is absolutely clear that everything that's going on in the Mideast right now was already laid out in that national security strategy because it made absolutely clear, first and foremost, that we were establishing our own energy independence and dominance, that that Trump was going to end a world in which you have these kinds of energy choke points, and obviously prevent Iran from the nuclear and the terrorist threat as well, and that our interests were in creating a different set of combinations in the world, one in which you didn't have some kind of imperial superstructure, which was making everybody absolutely vulnerable to things like the Strait of Hormuz, which of course they've done in various ways. They've done it by keeping the Mideast in conflict. They've done it through, their control over finance and insurance, cutting off insurance in the Strait immediately. But think of another way that they've done it. They did it with the Green Agenda, convincing people to get rid of nuclear power and remain reliant on foreign fossil fuel. Even we were reliant on foreign fossil fuel until Trump came back. So, what Trump is doing with this is far more than just taking on a dangerous regime, which he has always said he is going to do. What Trump is doing is essentially putting a reset button in terms of how how the world works from the standpoint of energy and strategic material. And then I would put that in the context of these amazing deals he just signed with Japan, because I know everybody's looking at Iran and they're not paying attention to everything else that Trump is doing. But the Commerce Department announced a month ago, two sets of two tranches. One was $33 billion in Japanese investment in LNG in the United States immediately. And then a later one, which is another $32 billion, as a sort of second tranche. So here's Japan, which has been totally dependent on the Strait, as Trump said, They get 90% of their oil through the strait. And Trump is saying, okay, well, you give us, you invest here, we have jobs here, and we're going to be able to provide you with Hormuz free or, avoidance of the strait energy. But even more important, I think, than these huge natural gas deals, Japan is investing $40 billion in small modular nuclear reactors, right? In the United States. You want to break the empire's grip over energy in the world, let's move on from fossil fuels or use them as needed, but ensure that you've got 21st century energy. And while this wasn't in the immediate deal, previously the United States is signing other agreements in terms of thermonuclear fusion, which is the next step in this whole thing. So I think people have to sort of step back from the fog of war, which is hard to do when you're in one, and look at how empires have controlled the world, and look at how everything that Donald Trump is doing is busting that apart and bringing other major nations like Japan and implicitly Russia, and I would say implicitly China, into this configuration of sovereign nations who say, hey, we're going to develop independent of some supranational rules or infrastructure, which tells us we have to stay backward. That's what I think is actually the big news this week.
So what you're saying is that we're going to get our flying cars.
Yeah.
Because I've been waiting since I'm like 12.
Well, I don't want to see flying cars until we get literacy back up again and drug usage down. But maybe someday.
I'm not going to. Well, I'm not going to see flying cars. But okay, that's fine. That's Colonel.
I think to Susan's point, that's one of the things in doing the research that I've done, and I've talked with Tommy about it often, is the strategy of tension, where you can consolidate these pockets of power, obviously the Middle East being energy, and by controlling the players in that pot, then you have the ability, number one, for instant conflict then disrupts, and then you're able to control outward second and third order effects, i.e. countries, by controlling that particular area. And I agree with her wholeheartedly that that system of control is being broken down. And if you zoom out to her point about the fog of war, you can clearly see that happening. And most people stay focused on the tactical level as opposed to zooming out to the strategic level of what's actually going on.
I can't. Again, we're all going to sit here and mutual appreciation society like it. I agree. I've been saying for weeks, I'm like, we're all paying the chaos premium. And the point of, I'm at the point now where I'm like, Donald Trump is keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. The Iranians aren't doing it. We are. Because we're putting the pressure on Europe to fork them, decide whether or not you want your oil and gas that comes out of the Middle East, or you get to maintain your war with Ukraine, or you have to, pay the Russians. Like they've lost that. They've lost that from a tactical perspective. And at this level, that's actually tactical, folks. Given the big things that we're talking about here, that's what he's doing right now. He's made it abundantly clear to everyone. And then, and why should we pay the chaos premium anymore? I have been getting more and more and more angry the more I think about this, how we've been sitting here watching and the remnants of an empire born in piracy.
Yes.
Born in piracy, that then controls all the geographic choke points, maritime choke points around the world, to then foment and then sells arms and weapons and gins up religious warfare and conflict between the people on either side of the choke point, so that we can turn around and they can then and pay those pirates to then create chaos, and then they write the insurance premiums for it, and they make the vig, and they're the ones clearing all the transactions, and they're the ones with the bar association, with the who accredit the lawyers who write the contracts and the this and the that and all of this stuff, and we're all supposed to sit there and go, oh, but this is just the way it's always been, folks. Like, how about no? How about go fuck yourself? We are going to take that money back. And and then after World War II, it was the US Navy that got to do all the policing and yet keep this system in place. If every American who has ever listened to me talk thinks I'm crazy, I'm sorry, you're an idiot. You should be outraged by this. Every day you get up and you look at your tax bill, you should be outraged by this. Like bodily.
That can't be, that point can't be driven home
that
enough.
The U.S.
from
Navy foots the bill for global shipping, and not only that. Sorry to interrupt you, Colonel, but people go, well, all these Nordic countries have this. They have a safety net because they have a big brother named the United States that is a machine war god from hell. You're allowed to have your thing.
And Lloyd's of London are allowed to make the profits from our navies securing the maritime commerce.
Correct.
And it's even worse than that, because in order to continue funding the Navy doing this and all of the green agenda that Susan talked about and the energy and security and the this and the this and the that, what have we done? We've had to do what? Float $39 trillion worth of debt that we're paying $1 trillion a year in interest on. To whom? The very same foreign central banks are the ones that are running the piracy gig that we're paying the insurance, and then we're paying the insurance premiums on. So not only are we paying the income tax and the property tax, and in order to pay for the friggin' coupon payments, but we're also paying the insurance premiums and higher oil prices, and therefore higher labor costs and this and that and everything else all the way around the world. So at the end of the day, I'm going to go right back to Eddie Murphy in Trading Places, so that I have to choose between heating my house and buying my kid the G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. Like, this is how pathetic it is. And now they're literally telling all the people in Europe, in order to come together to fight the demon Trump, you have to stop, heating your homes and cooking with fuel and, cooking your food and all this stuff. I'm like, and it's your patriotic duty. And if not, we're gonna bring the gendarme in and we're gonna beat you up. What world are we living in here that these people are supposed to be the good guys? They're the insouciant and wise ones of old Europe, and we're just a bunch of mouth-breathing friggin' Yanks. How about, literally, as people, I'm like, how about no? Please. And how about no? They're cockroaches over the Persians who refuse to tell the truth on a good day. We're supposed to believe everything that comes out of their mouth. They're negotiating in good faith. They did this. They did that. How about they just shot a ballistic missile at Diego Garcia? How about
they've been negotiating in good faith for years and years and years. I mean,
of course, it's just like
it's been going on for 40. It's been going on for 47 years for a reason, and no president was really going to ever take this on, because no president actually had an American foreign policy, which is why I always encourage people, if you haven't read the National Security Strategy, just put it in your browser. It'll pop right up, totally readable, less than 30 pages, written for normal human beings, not for Georgetown foreign policy professors,
not for bar association accredited lawyers.
It is an amazing document, and there is nothing that is happening in the world right now that you will not find in that document, and that makes clear that this administration had thought this thing through from the get-go. Now, the timing of the current conflict, I don't know. We're not going to know till it's over. Whether this was exactly of Trump's choosing, or whether Israel forced it at a time when Trump wasn't ready to do it, I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it, because we were going to do it anyway at some point. We had to do it at some point. And we're doing it for precisely the reasons. This is really one of the last strangleholds that they have, in terms of one of these kinds of choke points. The other thing I would bring up is look at the extent of nuclear deals that the administration is making with the Gulf states, with Saudi Arabia, with the other Gulf states. Again, the whole point is to create nations which are not simply, gas stations for the city of London, but nations that actually develop. Go back a little bit, go back to the 1970s. In the 1980s, in the 1970s in Mexico, there was an infamous statement by Zbigniew Brzezinski, because Mexico, of course, has huge oil resources. And one of their presidents, Lopez Portillo, wanted to use the revenues from the oil resources to develop nuclear power so that Mexico would not always be at the mercy of oil, would become a modern developed nation. You know what Zbigniew Brzezinski said? We will not tolerate a Japan south of our border, right? We do not want a developed nation south of we want another gas station that can be manipulated. And if you want to, ask yourself why Mexico is under the grip of the cartels at this point, well, that's just one of the other franchises of the City of London. Rather than allowing Mexico to become a developed, industrial, and stable partner for the United States south of our border, that was stopped. And you have a narco-dominated, I wouldn't say run, but a narco-blackmailed government in Mexico right now, which has resulted in drugs and illegal immigration and all the other things. But all of it comes from the same place. They do not want strong, stable nations. And
Well,
they met their match.
they also viewed Mexico as a labor resource for the U.S. oligarchs and to profit off of them. I mean, that's what the Clinton trade agreement was all about, to be able to basically offshore close by a labor resource. So to your point, Susan, I have a question for you. What do you view Turkey's role in all of this?
I'm not going to take a stab at that because I'd be over my skis. I mean, obviously, Erdogan is a very problematic figure. And I'm not sure on each particular day who he's loyal to outside of himself. So I think I'm going to leave it at that because I would be getting above my skis. Tom probably has something more intelligent to say about that.
I don't know if it's intelligent, but it'll certainly be inflammatory. But yeah. And by the way, just to remind everybody in the audience, when you hear people like Susan and Colonel Watkins, myself, and Tommy all say things like, I don't know, that's a hallmark that that we're telling you as close to the truth as we can, because we're not here trying to play ego games.
Yeah,
I need this to be made abundantly clear. It's really hard, especially at this moment in time. Everybody is wanting to be the expert. Everybody has, and none of us know anything. We just have opinions and our particular research, and we have the pretense of knowledge. We have the Hayekian pretense of knowledge problem. We just have to remind ourselves of that. And at this point in time, malice and disinformation is everywhere. So a guy like Erdogan, the one thing I will say is this: when you're confused about something, that's the hallmark of a successful intelligence operation. When you've been able to bamboozle 2 or 3 generations of people, then it's a great intelligence operation. And that's IRAN. Iran has been nothing but an intelligence operation for 47 years, or maybe 118 or 118, however you want to frame it. I don't know how Susan feels about that. But what I'd say about Erdogan is this. He's in a very interesting position because he's always played both sides of the thing well. I would say don't hate the play, I hate the game, right? Same thing with Netanyahu. Don't hate the play, I hate the game. Well, you can hate Netanyahu because he's sinister, or if he's still alive. But he's in a much different position than he was in, say, 6 or 7 years ago. When you go back and, when I was always really confused about Erdogan, and then having chatted with Susan and others in our orbit, and they just made the connection: Muslim Brotherhood, City of London. He's the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm like, that is more explanatory of a lot of his crazy actions than anything else. It's not wholly explanatory, but it's certainly more explanatory than he's just in it for himself, because he controls one of the major maritime choke points in the world. And then he goes out and he does like crazy shit, like, claiming half of the Eastern Mediterranean for himself, being allowed to move on and occupy half of Cyprus for the last 55 years, 54 years, or whatever it is, right? 53 years. Go through all this and you ask yourself, Turkey, and then obviously Erdogan has been in power 53 years, but you understand what I mean. That Turkey's occupying Cyprus and the British are going along with it. I wonder why. Even though they moved against a NATO partner, Greece, none of it makes any sense, right? So you have to ask yourself, why does he do what he does? It's always to maintain that the balance of the balance of powers around the choke point, because the goal is always Russia. Because the goal is always to bottle Russia up. The British are very, very simple. Bottle the Russians up and don't let them have a more motor port. Don't let them have Crimea, have Sebastopol or Simferopol. Don't let them have access to the Bosporus. Don't let them have real control over the Caspian. Don't let them have a transport corridor, trade corridor down to the Indian Ocean. No different than allowing China to have. Why are we in Singapore? Why? Because of the Straits of Malacca. Why do we have intelligence operations all the way around the world operating whenever China tries to get around the Straits? Talk to me about central Myanmar.
Right.
For the last 15 years. Right? Okay. That's why. Why were we against Belt and Road? Why were we against all of these things? And then Iran becomes and so what they've done in many ways is they've closed off all the other access points in order to focus everything down. Now that they think about it, clearly just focus everything down to Tehran.
Right.
And the Straits of Hormuz, because they've lost so they've effectively controlled everything else and maneuvered everybody down to this one. And then Trump's like, you know what? Taking out my lightsaber that says Gordian on it, and we're gonna cleave that thing, and we're gonna beat it up until it's gone, and then let the chips fall where they may. And I'm like, so, and Erdogan and because he's done that, it's put Erdogan in a very, very tenuous position, because he can no longer play the game. He has to choose a side, and he's clearly choosing the side of who his real paymasters are, and why he's angry at times with the EU not letting Turkey into the EU. That's them holding him on the leash, going, "You're not allowed to have any real power. You're our subordinate, and we're going to hold this over your head the entire time." So then he changes the flow of immigrants through Turkey and all that stuff, and so they constantly, he constantly bucks the leash to his quote unquote to his credit, but that leash is tight, very tight.
Trump
I'd love to hear what Colonel Watkins has to say about any of that, because you and I've never talked about anything along these lines, Tommy. I hate to interrupt. I was like actually saying all that because I wanted to hear what Colonel Watkins thought about my insanity. So
I don't think anything you said is insane. The reason why I focus on Turkey is obviously my background has been researching the Gladio destabilization tactics, the tension. And Turkey always stood out as a very unique entity to me. After World War II, we were the primary funders of their military. We helped them set up their Grey Wolf, which is their element of Operation Gladio stay-behind units. And Turkey has played a decisive role in many of the worldwide assassinations and attacks that were formulated as, Muslim radicals, when in fact they were Turkish operators. And I mean, at the end of the day, two Turkish stay-behind guys were imprisoned for the attempted assassination on the Pope when they were shot. So a lot of people lose that in the conversation. And in the past, whenever anybody was elected in Turkey that wasn't controlled by the military would have a coup and overthrow the prime minister or president, whichever one they call it there. And they were in a perpetual coup status. It's like you had to comply with the city of London and the New York bankers, or you didn't get to be in charge of Turkey. And it didn't matter who they elected. The military would and that kind of, for me, being in the military, I'm like, okay, well, they supposedly modeled their government after a democracy where you got to vote, but you don't actually get to vote, because if you vote for the wrong person, they just overthrow them. And the thing that struck me was when Erdogan anticipated that, when he was making some very interesting decisions, and the military did try to coup him, and he basically assassinated all the generals that orchestrated the coup. He was the first president in the modern day history of Turkey that thwarted this cycle. And that drew to me a lot of attention to him, and what was his agenda. And you basically, if you start looking at a lot of the decisions he's made since then, he stays right under the radar of being a renegade. Like he was one of the primary sources of food for Venezuela. A lot of people don't
Mhm.
know that he traded a lot with Venezuela, and that was kind of shocking to me on the surface. But then when you realize that it appears to me that he is being used as one of those destabilization forces, which is what I found that very interesting with his recent meeting with MBS. And he was given full state honors when he met with MBS. And so I don't know if that was a roundabout way to try to bring him under the tent of the new way of doing, yeah, of new way of doing business, offer him the olive leaf if he wants to take it. And I think the jury is still out as to whether or not he's accepted that.
That's a really good analysis of, Erdogan. I refuse to call him Erdogan because I don't like him. And I'm like Trump that way. I'm like, but no, that's a very, very good analysis. Very, very astute because you're right. One of the things that we have to remind ourselves and aboard this in this much flux, right? People's old allegiances are going to flip. Like I played it. I've said this
But they're going to
1,000
be
times.
offered the opportunity to flip.
Right. It's like at the end of the day, like I've played enough games where I had to like grab somebody and walk them into the back room and go, and we can watch it in real time, right? And you're like, okay, I can do that. Like you can watch it in geopolitics. It's no different. It's like Lindsey Graham maps to the neocons who maps to these guys who maps to these guys. And yet Trump but if Trump's in charge of the Millennial Envelope quotient, which his Millennial Envelope, which has been, which has the pictures of him with the little boys or whatever it is, like all of a sudden Lindsey's on our side. Or maybe
Lindsey is now questioning NATO. I mean, when you look at how much support there was for NATO, I mean, Trump has had his hands tied in terms of congressional votes on this stuff. Right. And what he's just done with all of this is, begin to fracture the impenetrable pro-NATO wall in Congress, which was probably led by Lindsey Graham.
Of course. It's a great point, Susan. So to finish off what I was thinking about Erdogan and what Colonel Watkins said, he's in a very interesting position. MBS reaching out to him, full state honors. Why don't you come in here? Two Sunni brothers having a little chat over how we should carve up the world tomorrow. Because Erdogan can look at what's happening, see that Trump has forked London and Europe versus Iran and all their proxies, and that would include Qatar, Bahrain, because he's already done this. He's already flipped Qatar, Bahrain, the UAE, all these people, and all this stuff. So he's already forced all that out into the open. You think he was really upset that the Israelis bombed the Qatari LNG field, the South Pars gas field? Do you really think he was upset about that? I don't. I think he's upset that it goes any further than that. But this is Donald Trump. And, real nice gas field you got there. Would be a real shame if somebody blew it up. Bibi. Because it gives him leverage with all of to ensure that everybody's on board. This is the new architecture. And then that puts Erdogan in a very, very tenuous position because Trump just strengthened Vladimir Putin's hand in Russia hard. It weakened Europe. It's weakened the city of London. And now, as Colonel Watkins just pointed out, he's the first guy to quote unquote buck the system. So is that leash getting a little looser? Maybe. Would it be? And again, Trump's not above working with people he doesn't like in order to get what he wants. Right. And that's the hallmark of an adult, by the way. So while we're all sitting here agreeing with each other and doing the Mutual Appreciation Society and it's only because we're thinking through very complex stuff. We could be disagreeing about this left and right, and if we were, we would try and act like adults while we did it, right? But this is the situation I think we're in today. So that's what I've got. I'll shut up now.
The question I wanted to ask when you said, who's controlling Hormuz, Trump, and it's to put pressure on Europe, saying if you want your war or if you want to fight back against an orange man, you're going to have to suffer. You're not going to be able to heat your homes, blah, blah, blah. How does that tie into, Susan, what you were saying about the SMNRs, the small modular nuclear reactors? Are those two related or are those on much different timescales? That was my question, is because they're both energy sources and gripping energy sources as a choke point.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're on the same plane. I mean, I don't, people might have seen Italy just said we're rethinking nuclear. We want to go back to nuclear. So, I mean, you're just cracking. It's forcing, you can only live in a world of insanity so long. If the people running the world are sort of enabling insanity and, giving you you can get some gas from Russia, you can get some gas through the Gulf and so on. And then all of a sudden these things start getting turned off. And you're not completely insane. Now, some of the leaders of these countries are completely insane, but if you're somebody who nominally represents the best interests of your country, like Italy, you say, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. We're going to go back to nuclear. Of course, Germany said the same thing. It was the worst mistake we ever made. So, I mean, they have been on this question of throttling advanced energy, well, nuclear isn't even advanced, modern energy development, for 50 years. And it's in the process of breaking big time because Trump is, first of all, showing. I mean, I think one of the most amazing things, we've all talked about geopolitics, the great game, Mackinder, the world landmass, what British strategy is. I mean, all of us have probably talked about this for decades, and we've described it to people. This is one of the things that I think is amazing about Donald Trump. I've described it to lots of people, and it didn't stick, and it went in one ear and, out the other. Now people are seeing this in real time, right? They're seeing how this actually works, how we've been blackmailed, essentially, by accepting a system, accepting regimes, accepting ideologies for no other reason that we were convinced to accept them. And Donald Trump, has walked in and said, hey, I don't believe any of this shit. We're just going to do things differently.
Well,
and it's like, boom.
and what he's done is he's proven to, again, the intelligence operation thing I mentioned earlier, the great one, that we can have consensus politics, which doesn't actually respect sovereignty. Right. Which then advances an agenda of, for lack of a better term, globalism. Or we can have power politics where everybody starts acting in their own best interest. And we're just living in a world today where everybody's really, really uncomfortable with what it's always been power politics. It's always been the iron fist and the velvet glove. That insists that the velvet glove is now frayed to the point where people can see the iron fist. And we're here in it. And Trump's like, I never had a velvet glove on. Yeah. I just walked in with two iron fists, like Chuck Norris is looking down from heaven going,
rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Chuck. Absolutely. I mean, that's where we are. And the shock now and why it's, I think why it's getting through to people, Susan, I think to your point, is that they're finally getting to see it in real time. Go, oh my God, were we just propagandized into believing that our military was useless? Were we propagandized into believing that Iran was this great power or this, the blah, blah, all of these false narratives. And all of a sudden, the lies, which are very expensive to maintain, are punched through with one guy with a big freaking sword that goes, no. And then everybody goes, and then we have that Rene Girard style mimetic collapse where the old world that you thought you lived in was not true. It's like Mr. Tagomi and the Man in High Castle breaking through to the real world. It's like what happened to me when I looked up on June 12th last year, and I'm like, holy shit, what the Israelis and the Americans just pulled off is an order of magnitude bigger than anything anybody ever thought that they could pull off ever. Maybe.
He can't say it.
No, I did. Maybe I was wrong. I'm easily, I could say it. I have other people in my orbit who can't say it. And they're the ones you're watching right now go through unbelievable levels of cope. And I don't wish that on anybody, right? I don't at all. I don't. But I'm like,
So the analogy that
Good.
I use is the Wizard of Oz. Instead of pulling the curtain back slowly and exposing him,
Hmm.
Trump, to your sword analogy, just slicing the curtain off, and
Hmm.
there it is.
Yeah, it's just we and the reason why the sword metaphor works is because we've lived under this sword of Damocles, which has been made out of paper and painted steel, what they look like steel, but it's never been real at all. The real, and this is the thing that really bothers me when we stop to think about it, is that, and we've all been, and the thing that has allowed that sword to look far more potent than it actually is the threat of nuclear annihilation. And so now we should be asking ourselves, not only is, Susan, you're correct that nuclear is old technology, certainly certainly heavy water reactor Gen 1 reactors that we use to make plutonium on the 238 cycle, on the uranium 238 cycle. Now let's get into the stuff that I really know, as opposed to Gen 3, Gen 4, small pebble reactors, and this one and that, and all these ones that can't melt down, that have no, we had this technology for years, decades. And so, but it was suppressed for a variety of things, a variety of reasons, not the least of which was that we had to continue making the game to continue to extend the game. This game should have been, this is like a game of Dune that should have been over in round 6, and we're still in round 14. And the guild is in charge of the game going, no, I want this game to go on to round 30. And you're like, but no, but it's a 15-turn game. No, it's a round. No, we get to, it's Calvin ball. We get to change the rules of the game. We get to keep the game going for as long as possible. It's ridiculous. We've decided, no, that's it. It's over. We're done. And we did this. I want to remind everybody that, because they've told us for years we have no agency, we don't control our elections, we don't do this, we don't do that. No. We elected Donald Trump against all odds. We said we're going to do
all odds.
Yes.
against all odds 3 times. We asked for this, and we demanded it. And only twice were we able to were they able to not be able to sell the lie to the world. And then we saw Brexit, and we've seen Meloni in Italy, and we've seen Orban survive in Hungary and other places. And again, every little victory becomes a seed that can grow and a thing that you can rally around. And this is the way I've been watching the shift in geopolitics for over a decade. It's like, I'm not interested in saying the game is rigged against us, and that I'm not interested in that. That's not an interesting story. We know what that story looks like. They win, and we get, and my daughter grows up in a horrible dystopian technocracy that I read about when I was 15. Or I can try and find the little kernels of truth, the little kernels of hope, and then see if they build on themselves. And they have. They've been building on themselves, going back to, I put the first moment of it really when the British Parliament denied David Cameron Obama's invasion of Syria. That was the moment when I woke up, right? And then 2 years later, we have Putin moving into Syria to stop, ISIS. And then Trump comes back into power. They split the country in half. The Russians take the western half. The Americans take the eastern half, right? And then Syria Syria was really the end of the empire. Everything else we're living with since then has been the aftershocks of them not getting Syria. That's the way I've looked at it. Now, I could be wrong about that, but that's been my framework. And every little victory in Syria was another victory where somebody else, like the Saudis or this one's or that one's, go, oh, maybe we can get out from underneath this. Because most of these people were negotiating with a gun to their head.
Right.
Right. So if you can move the gun back a little bit, they have a little bit of room. When eventually the gun is halfway across, you might be able to duck and miss, and they might miss, or their hands might shake or something, or there may be a misfire or something. Take the metaphor wherever you want to go with it. I don't really care. The point being is that it helps give voice to the voiceless, and it helps give the captured a little bit of spine. Right. That's why one of the great movies of all time is The Great Escape. Right. Because right. So, like at the end of the day, folks, we did tell really great stories like 50, 60 years ago. We did here and there. So,
well,
I
there's another
recommend everybody
analogy
rewatch them. Yeah.
beyond The Great Escape and The Wizard of Oz, which is The Emperor's New Clothes, right?
Yep.
And when you actually think about that story, where everybody is bowing down to this phony idea that the emperor's got a beautiful new suit of clothes and he's actually naked, but what's really going on? Everybody's afraid. It's an emperor. They're all afraid. You're not supposed to disagree. And a little boy who doesn't know he's supposed to be afraid, just blurts out the truth and breaks the whole bubble. But I think it's important because, and I think it's really important for those people in the MAGA base who are getting distracted by all the crap at this point, in terms of Trump selling out to this, that, or the other thing. The question of the change in the strategic dynamic in the world is coming from the fact that Donald Trump has courage. That, that is your rallying point in the world. None of this would be happening if he decided to play it safe at any step of the way. But he has got his eye on what his end game is, and nobody is going to stop him. And over these 10 years, as people see this play out, it's, more and more people have snapped out of their fear and said, I'm going to have to do something. Whatever small part I'm going to play in this, I'm going to do something. And once people begin to think again like citizens who've got some measure of power, first because the world is becoming intelligible, it's not chaotic, because you always feel powerless if you think the world is chaotic. Well, what are you going to do? Resist, protest, build a bunker. But if the world is intelligible, if you can see who the forces are at play, and you can see how our side of the fight actually has enormous power because of the principles that our nation is based on in our civilization, then you begin to see, okay, I do have, even my small contribution, even if I'm going to go get 10 people to vote in the primary, or I'm going to become a poll watcher, or whatever they do, that
Right.
it begins to spread, and that's what the enemy is so afraid of. Their primary weapon in the United States right now, I think, is pessimism and distraction.
Apathy.
Yeah, and which breeds apathy. It doesn't start with apathy. I think it starts with the pessimism and the distraction. But if you break that and you make sure that people realize that their role is going to make a difference. We have a candidate here in Michigan who is running for governor. Not that I'm saying anything about his merits, but he tells a really important story. He ran a statewide election about a decade and a half ago. He won by 5,700 votes, which was less than one vote per precinct in the state of Michigan. That can make that kind of difference. One vote per precinct.
So to your point, I think if you go back in history and you look at true leaders who had a movement that was addressing this chaos and had a salient message of changing the dynamics, every single one of their movements, generally directed towards peace, was infiltrated. And you have insurgents because you have to fracture those movements.
COINTELPRO, yeah.
Yes. So I think it's very, very important for people to understand what they're seeing and have a notepad. Don't follow the people that are focusing on that insurgency as being a part of it. And they become the longer this goes on, they become more and more apparent who they are. Because they are being pressed up against a wall. The bigger and the wider this movement becomes, they're going to get more desperate to fracture it. And you, number one, you have to recognize what's going on. But number two, it's very, very important to ensure that you do not buy into that. So you have to recognize it. To me, that's the most important part of it. You cannot have such monumental change, not just in the United States, but around the world, that threatens the type of people that are going to be threatened without them spending money on insurgents to try to fracture that movement.
Absolutely. Which is why when I talk about desperation, go look right now at the the wing that is trying to quote unquote anti-war wing or whatever it is that within the quote magma. I'm not looking at the second tier guys. I'm not looking at the Tucker Carlsons. I'm not sure what to think about Tucker Carlson anymore. I'm almost completely done with him. But some of the other ones at the lower level, I'm looking at like guys like Rich Barris going out there the other day and saying Tucker Carlson, Joe Kent ticket in 2028 would slap. I'm like, I don't like what? The pillow? Like, what are you talking about? Like, these guys couldn't win anything. They're not that is an act of desperation that is so transparent. It's not even funny, and we see it in so many different. I'm seeing it everywhere at this point. In the watching, the second tier folks are the most obvious because they're the least trained and they're the least skilled at this. Because they have the least amount of experience at it. A guy like Steve Bannon knows exactly what he's doing. Okay? Someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene? Nope. Not at all. Someone like, I don't know. I mean, I can go down the list. And the problem with those people is that they were sent out there to gain your trust. And this is the way it is. They gain your trust. They become insurgents, the way Colonel Watkins just pointed it out, and they exist within the quote unquote podcast space. They exist in the alt media. They exist everywhere, and it's very obvious that they were there to build trust, to play games, to constantly show that they're open minded because they move their position one day and then they do something else the next day. But overall, you can see where they're hurting people towards, because during moments of crisis is all that matters. When there's no stakes, they can be pro-Trump. Right. When there's no stakes, when it looked like Trump was going to go to jail, they were all pro-Trump. All of them. Every one of them. They were all pro-Trump. But the minute Trump came back to power, now they had to start becoming balanced in their analysis. And they used the balance in their analysis to keep you on the I'm sorry, that's the grifter thing. They keep you on the hook. And it's very obvious. And I'm at the point now where
there are going to be people out there that are used in a proactive way to bring on Trump's side, that are going to be used to introduce information that otherwise can't be introduced by the administration.
Agreed. No, that's a very important point. Yes.
And I do think that it does require people to not. Anybody that's talking about something emotionally that triggers you emotionally, it's so important to allow whatever information they're providing to resonate for about 48 hours before you run out and start responding to it. Because that is one of the psychological operations that has been used by intelligence agencies for the last 75 years in order to craft narratives. So you have to be very circumspect when new ideas are introduced into the lexicon, into the media, to be able to assess where's it coming from and what's the intended purpose. Because there are things that we all know about, but the general population doesn't know about. And have to be introduced in particular ways in order for for people to start talking about it in everyday conversation. And that gets very confusing because these people, both the good guys and the bad guys, are very professional and know what they're doing. And so discernment is going to be critically important as we move forward to be able to figure out what information is real. But I view that as good because it makes people go back and do research. It makes people go back and ask questions. And that's what we should all be doing right now.
Well, you're absolutely right, Colonel Watkins, and I'm really glad you brought that up because it is true. Like Donald Trump is a master at bringing something up today that he's trying to set up 6 months from now. Like I've been saying for a year now, like he wants to do Fed reform, for example. How does he do Fed reform? Well, the first thing he does is just complaining about the Fed chair. Even though the Fed chair's out there with his current policy a year ago, I go back a year ago, that policy was supporting everything he was trying to do to cut trade deals and implement tariffs and everything else, you know, it was obvious, but he's like, oh, I got to beat you up, Jay. I just got to do it. And even if, I don't care whether, where Powell is now, I could care less. He's at the end of his career. It doesn't matter. That was the one for me. I'm like, I'm good at that one. That's one that I've talked about in recent memory. But we can go back to we can go back to, what was that guy's name? Anthony, the Wiener's laptop. We can go back to that one. Like, that was brought out. He was setting up like the Huma Abedin thing 6 months earlier in the friggin' 2016 campaign before it blew up, because he knew it was coming. Like, he does that very, very well. And yes, he does set. Yeah, he's very good at it. Like, and once you see him do it, like, oh, here he comes. Oh, I think and you just get really good at watching him do it. And then, of course, yes, he is going to have people out there helping him set you in motion, and and then you can watch the other people around him operate. And so, yeah, no, it's very sophisticated. And if you want my honest opinion, I think a lot of people who are Donald Trump's enemies at his level of the game. Now I'm talking about the heads of state over in Europe. I'm talking about, the people at the quote unquote, the people at the high table above them or whatever. They all think he's stupid and venal and vain, because you can see the way they craft their narratives around him whenever he acts. Right? Watch what did the Atlantic say? What was the talking point right after the war started from the Atlantic? Susan and Barbara pointed this out brilliantly in multiple videos. If you have not watched the media and action updates on these, you should go back and watch them, because he's literally telling you in real time the Atlantic is crashing out. John Bolton finally met a war he didn't like. This one, and what was their talking point? He doesn't have a plan for post-war Iran. Now they're telling you two things there. One, the war's already over. Iran's already lost, and we're not going to get to do what we want to do.
It's not going to turn out the way we want it.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's all, and the war's already over, and we're really butthurt about this.
Back to the Colonel's point about people asking questions. I think the most important thing, and this is a role that we've all played and others in our little universe here, is the only way you can actually ask questions seriously is if you've figured out what are the basic principles upon which this conflict is being fought. Because we all know you can ask questions and you can fall down 55 rabbit holes at once and never come out. And we all know people who never came out, right? But if you're asking from the standpoint of, okay, there are two systems in conflict in the world. There's the imperial system, which treats us all like animals to be culled, and used and enslaved. And there's the system of Western civilization, which became the American Constitution. All men are created equal, and we have a responsibility to continue God's creation. They're two separate systems, two separate views of man. If you start there, then you're going to be able to shape your questions and come to some kind of answers. And I think that's one of the things that's been most exciting about this recent period, because there's a hunger for that. I mean, we all see that in the response that we get on our own platforms and elsewhere. People are just hungry, saying, you put the pieces together for me. Now it makes sense. And that again gets back to this question of, well, then I can do something about this. It's not random. It's not chaotic.
You're giving people weaponry. You're teaching them how to fish, not handing them fish. And let's bring in, one of the missing men on our formation this morning, Alex Craner, who identified because remember, these people always tell you what their plans are. They always tell you, they're so arrogant. Like George Soros telling us that this is a fight between two systems of governance. Globalism and sovereigntism, whatever you want to call it, but however, Soros framed it. But that's literally what Susan just said. And there's Alex out there, like, for the last 4 years, reminding everybody Soros said this. Keep hammering that and using it as a basis for us to have conversations about what it is that is happening, even if during, various crisis points, we disagree with what we actually think is happening, which is what we're supposed to do, because we're all human with a different perspective on the world. Like, I don't see the world the same way Colonel Watkins does. Even when we agree about a lot of things, we don't see everything the same way. So, and that's the healthy part, because when you have people around you and you cultivate and curate people around you whose opinions and perspectives on the world you respect, it acts as an error check on what it is you think you're seeing, and it keeps you from becoming, as Ian McGilchrist would put it, left brain dominant. Right? Because our intelligence services understand how the human brain works. They're not dumb. You have the right brain does the threat assessment, and the left brain is the targeting reticle, right? And the targeting reticle can overwhelm the threat assessor and physically make you ignore that and keep you focused on the targeting reticle. And what's the goal of all of these psyops that we deal with on a daily basis? Is to keep you focused on that. That's the problem right there. And so, all of us have the potential to get lost in it's the city of London, it's whatever it is, whatever our thing is for the day. So keep your wits about you, and then back up and go, as opposed to constantly looking at threats and weaknesses, start looking at strengths and opportunities. And this classic business SWOT analysis, SWOT analysis, we watch people focus on weaknesses and the threats, because they're in a state of anxiety and fear, as opposed to thinking about, well, what are the strengths of this policy, and what are the opportunities that happen on the other side of it? And if you start balancing, if you constantly go through the four quadrants, you stay reasonably balanced, and you can come up with a rational, at least you come up with a framework that you can build on, and then do research on, ask questions about, and move forward on. That's what I think.
What Susan said about when you start seeing all the puzzle pieces coming together and you can do something. It's that Steve Jobs quote where he says the single most important point in your life in becoming an entrepreneur is when you look at these things that you always just accept it as static, the width of a road, a sidewalk, the color of a building, and instead you realize it's something that if you put your finger in this way, it pops out that way, and then all of a sudden everything you accepted as just objective, that's a highway and it's 6 lanes and the door opens this way. Once you realize that any of it's malleable, you realize all of it's malleable, and then the universe is the limit. You can do anything. I think that's an important point, is to stop looking at this as some monolith that is, you can't do anything. There's nothing you can do. It's just what it is. Doesn't matter if even Eisenhower was talking about atoms for peace. You need to shut up and get in line. That's just what it's not what it is. It's not what it is at all. And so, yeah, that's in my agreement. Yeah.
But the CIA and the rest of the intelligence agencies has spent billions of dollars to demoralize populations all over the world, for them to not be able to not live in fear. And because they know they can control anyone that lives in that state. And that's what all of the false flags and those types of things are about, is so that they can implement control mechanisms. And I think for the first time, to Susan's point about the sovereignty piece of this, I don't think it gets talked about very much, but one of the critical things that came to my attention in the research that I do is any country post-World War II that asserted their sovereignty was targeted, and targeted in a way that unleashed all of these, because the current state control thing that we're trying to address cannot exist with sovereign nations. And I think that's one of the most empowering, good news stories of all of this, is asserting and recognizing other players' sovereignty. And people say, well, that's kind of the opposite of going in and doing what we did in Venezuela or in Iran. And I argue that those were not sovereign countries. They were controlled, and they were part of this ability to destabilize, by the fact that they were controlled, entire regions of the world through the strategy of tension. And by changing that dynamic it then allows the rest of the second and third order in their regions to be able to act as sovereign players. And that has up until, I mean, I do think that JFK tried I mean, with him working with Charles de Gaulle, he wanted to work with Patrice Lumumba, but they killed him 3 days before he took office. He wanted to work with Sukarno. He wanted to work with all of the people that had asserted sovereignty over their country and was working with regional players. It was very clear to me what he was doing. And if you go back and read real history as opposed to what you were taught in school, and he was a threat to this entire world order that they were building, and he had to go. Same thing with RFK. And so like I said, any movement that has reached across the aisle, across races, across religions, has been infiltrated and derailed from the inside. And that's the one thing that I believe we have to guard against in this, because you are watching a complete change of world order in in all of these recent events. It's just such an incredible time to be living and watching this finally happen.
It's not just, it is that, it's also a privilege to be able to have the ability to talk about it with other people in real time. It's a real privilege to do this and trying to help people work through it and watch yourself work through it in real time. Your point about sovereignty is something I've been saying for years. I'm like during when Russia first moved across the border into Ukraine, I argued, Dexter White and I argued bitterly about this. And he said, Russia moved across and invaded a sovereign nation. I said, I'm sorry, but Ukraine's not sovereign. It's sovereign in name only. And, once
since 2014.
No, I don't think Ukraine was sovereign since 1991.
Even before, but you can make a really good case since 2014.
Right. Of course. And I think this is the thing. It's like, I agree that we should be arguing about whether or not we should be solving our issues with armies as opposed to, diplomacy. I'm all for diplomacy, but when you have somebody who refuses to negotiate, then you leave them no other option but to use armies. And if you review that war and you review the way that war has been fought and the way the Russians did exactly what we just did. First 48 hours, they'd blitzkrieged Ukraine and tried to decapitate and take Kiev, and then Putin made the simple mistake of trusting Boris Johnson, of trusting Zelensky, and then Boris Johnson came in and blew the whole thing up, and then the British counterattacked, and then turned it into a war of attrition to kill as many Slavs as possible, and that's disgusting. And these are the same people that are in charge of Iran. We're not going to let that happen this time, and it's a different world. So, is Iran a sovereign nation? Is Venezuela clearly not a sovereign nation? Mexico's not a sovereign nation. I'd argue Canada's not a sovereign nation. I know people think that's funny, but it's not. It's true. Yeah. It's Canada's not.
The sovereign of Canada is King Charles.
Of course.
So it's not. By name, it's not a sovereign nation.
No, I know. I wasn't picking on you, Susan. I know you were laughing because you were agreeing with me. I know that. I understand that. But it's just like, but when you bring up Canada, it's like it becomes like this mind blowing thing to say Canada was just Pakistan or India, and then you're like, and then people look at you and go, and then you have to ask yourself, how did Pakistan get nuclear weapons? Ooh, there's a good question. So this is all great. It is a real privilege and an honor to be able to do this and do it well enough that people think that it's worth listening to. Every day I get up and I'm like, I have the greatest job in the world. I have the greatest privilege in the world. And and just to remind everybody about that, I love this because it is an honor and a privilege to try and help people across this period of this, because we all have an agenda, which is to make the world a better fucking place. It ain't that hard. We're going to make the world better. And how we're going to get there and how we do it is that's where everybody gets to find their way in the division of labor, right? To bring it back to the economic terms, and the human action terms. But this thing is funny, watching this play out now, Like, I almost want to go to where we're going to go next, because I almost feel like Iran is over. It's not over, but I almost feel like it is over. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so what's next?
What do you think is next? Is it Taiwan?
Oh, I think it's the end of nuclear. I think it's the end of nuclear threat completely. I think Trump's ultimate goal is to prove to the world that we don't even need nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
That's been a passion
Ooh.
of his
Wait,
for
what?
decades.
Right, it has been, hasn't it? And it's something we never talk about.
He learned that from his uncle, which is
So-
why he was a very early supporter of what Reagan did with the Strategic Defense Initiative, right? What was the point of the SDI? Render thermonuclear
Yeah.
weapons impotent and obsolete.
Yeah, was it Reykjavik? Yeah, or
Yeah.
Reagan kept saying it's like a gas mask for the world, and yeah, Gorbachev was like, "Will you shut the fuck up about the
Yeah.
gas mask?"
Actually, and what's funny, and I want to give Susan credit for this, because it's something that I always had in the back of my mind, but I forgot about. And then you mentioned it. I don't know, either in a conversation you and I had, or I watched one of your other videos or whatever, and I'm like, oh, right. And then I think about the myriad of conversations that I've had with Dexter White about the practicality and the facts of what it means to maintain a nuclear program and nuclear warheads, and how much money it costs and everything else. And I was literally thinking about this the other day, and I'm like, because I said, I planted my flag on Twitter and said, Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, period. I don't think that duplicitous Persians have the right to blackmail the world with nuclear fire. Well, then what about Pakistan? I don't think Pakistan should have nuclear weapons either. And then I went, why did the British give them to them? I don't think anybody should have nuclear weapons. I'm all for this. And then you start really thinking about the types of munitions that we're highlighting here, that we're showing off that we can do, the amount of warfare that we can unleash on other militaries, but not necessarily on civilians. The proportionality of military targets to civilian targets. It's unworldly. It's otherworldly, and how much it's 99% military and less than 1% civilian at this point. Why do we need nuclear weapons for? What's the primary? But strategically, what do nuclear weapons represent? An existential threat to large-scale civilian populations. Well, if we have the technology for armies to fight amongst themselves and blow each other up, again, this goes back to things that Ian Burlingame has talked about, getting rid of the Devil's Legions and all these other things. You start really thinking through those ideas. You get to, oh, well, we have weapons now where we can just zot and take out that unit over there, and take out that tank, and take out that, and we don't have to threaten. We don't have to threaten people, the civilians. Now, the people who fight wars by putting their military hardware behind civilian populations, are they civilized actors in this? We should all be asking ourselves that question. And
if you look at Bertrand Russell, right? First, Bertrand Russell was ready to bomb Russia. The great peacenik. I mean, he literally called for dropping the bomb on Russia before they
developed it. His whole thing, was let's neuter them in the cradle.
Then they develop it, and then it's a weapon for basically running perpetual managed conflict, right? You keep countries at each other's throats perpetually, right on the brink. You're never going to get peace. You're always going to have some game master sitting on top, which is your Brzezinskis and your Kissingers and, all of the rest of them. And Trump hated that. Reagan hated that. To his lasting credit, he fought through the Bush crowd in his administration and announced the SDI actually on March 23rd, 1983. So
Really?
2 days from now. Not only that, we were in the middle of that fight. He had written the speech announcing the SDI. Secretary of State James Baker took it out. And his chief of staff, or maybe it was the National Security Director's chief of staff, I can't remember which one. No, it was William Clark. He walked back into the president, handed him the two speeches, and said, you decide which one you're going to give. Because we had gotten an advance copy. We had press credentials then. We had gotten an advance copy back then. And we were all ready to start jumping up and down because we had been fighting for it. And our boss said, no, Wait till he actually utters the words in the Oval Office.
The last minute.
That's right.
This, I look at the smile on her face. I'm watching
That's
Colonel
so-
Watkins. I'm watching
so cool.
you two old, yeah, you two old operatives go here. This is fucking great.
And he did. And it did. We didn't build it, but it did change the world. The Soviets panicked. They said, all right, we got to accelerate our military buildup in case they do this. And that's what ultimately wrecked their economy and brought them down. But this has been a critical dynamic, and I think this has been a passion of Trump's the whole time. And he's not going to tolerate it in Iran. He's not going to tolerate it anywhere. But again, once you develop a new defensive capability based on new physical principles, which is what the Strategic Defense Initiative is, not just kinetic missiles shooting down missiles. New physical principles, lasers, particle beams, the whole family of these kinds of things, you can render thermonuclear ICBMs impotent and obsolete. Mm-hmm. And that's what the world needs.
And then you start thinking about the world we live in today with the rampant inflation, the rampant destabilization. Again, like I look at this and I think about it like an economist. I think about it as a manager of capital over the course of time, and I have to look at a country like Pakistan and I have to ask myself, do they have the money really to maintain those weapons? Like, do they have the infrastructure and the know-how and this without us being in there doing it for them, or the British? And then I have to ask the question, like, the British don't even control their own warheads. There are warheads. What if Trump, like, told Starmer or even before him, Cameron, or whoever was in charge of Theresa May or whatever, like, oh, by the way, we're not renewing those warheads.
Just turned off the switch.
We just turned off the switch. We turned off the maintenance program. Sorry. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just speculating now. Right. This is the kind of thing, but these are the kinds of opportunities that exist downstream here. We can truly degrade all of this, all of these secondary powers. Why not? And if we stop building Gen 1 style light water reactors that create the plutonium, then what? If we all move to pebble beds and Gen 3s and all these other small modulars, none of these are light water reactors. They're all much different technology. All nuclear is not created equal, folks. Like, do the simple Wikipedia page of this, a simple Wikipedia search, take 5-10 minutes and read the page on this stuff, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And you realize that we don't need a preponderance of those. And if we don't have a preponderance of those, and we get to a subcritical amount of plutonium being produced on an annualized basis to maintain the nuclear weapon arsenal of the world, well, guess what? The nuclear weapon arsenal of the world has to degrade over time. That's just reality.
The nuclear weapons has been the greatest destabilization entity post-World War II. It has been wrapped around so much of the chaos. One of the big shocks for me, because of course in the military we're brainwashed into believing that the U.S. has done everything it can to non-proliferate. That's kind of been the mantra, right? Everything in military professional education was, we're the proponents of, and you find when you actually do the research, there's been a lot of assistance that the CIA has done around the world. I found out that the triggers actually came from Texas for the Pakistani program. And so you find out that, in fact, our propaganda campaign has been very good on the non-proliferation, but not in execution. And then you have to step back and say, well, what advantage was there to proliferating, not non-proliferating, proliferating nuclear weapons? Well, it just so happens that the places that they were, where we assisted, we being the West in general, because France has been a big player in all of this, they become the strategy of tension locations that are used to destabilize entire regions. And it has all been part of this entire initiative to take sovereignty away from countries, because if you are under the threat of nuclear attack. But my big surprise was how when you read declassified CIA documents, declassified National Security Council meetings, the 4512 group that met during Eisenhower's administration, how often it was the military that was advocating tactically nuking different countries in the late 40s and the 50s before there was any response to it. They wanted to nuke everybody.
They wanted to preemptively smother China, Russia. Yeah.
Holy crap. I was like dumbfounded. And I can tell you unequivocally, because I went through all of it, that's not taught anywhere in the military. It was never taught that we were like nuke. Curtis LeMay was like the one that was wanting to nuke everybody. Lyman Lemonsker, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that JFK fired for writing Operation Driftwood. Oh my God. It's like that was the answer to everything. They wanted to nuke Cuba. I was just shocked by all of it.
Annie Jacobson's book, The Pentagon's Brain, about DARPA, is the only book I've ever found that talked about that. And it wasn't just like random. It was like New York Times publications. There was like radio show talks about it. They had Bertrand Russell. It was like, all right, at what point do we put peace aside and we just, preemptively kill like 200 million people just to ensure planet America? Like that. And the only reason it ever stopped is because we're like, crap, they made one.
Yeah.
But that we were on board to do it. Like, yeah, never gets, it's hard to find online.
Yes.
We're straight up like, it's just kill them all in the cradle. They're just babies. Yeah, it's madness.
Yeah, no, truly madness. And
well, that's where we are right now.
Attack Plan R, folks. Like to invoke the Doctor Strangelove, right?
Yeah, right. But that's why where we are right now is so incredible, and it's just really important for people to understand that this is the first serious, durable resistance. It's not like people didn't want to or didn't try and they got shot or almost shot or whatever. Who knows, right? But this is the first serious, durable resistance in more than half a century. And people better understand this and get on board.
I was going to say, yeah, and the important part is to get on board, and then to ignore all the people who are trying to keep you focused on the minutia of the moment. Of course, they're going to do everything imaginable to stop Trump winning the midterms, getting rid of him, doing whatever they're going to do. We know that, folks. Like at the end of the day, well, then maybe, just maybe, stop focusing on, oh my God, the sky is going to fall, but start getting out there and going, Trump is literally trying to denuclearize the world. Shouldn't he get another? Yeah, but Congress sucks. Yeah, I know Congress sucks. But if he says these guys, I can work with, I just need these guys, and he doesn't need 90% of Congress. He just needs 52% of Congress. He just needs 52 real senators, 53 real senators, that are on board with him. And then for him, strategically, he needs to come up with ways for some of the Democrats to get an off ramp. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I think I brought it up the last time you and I spoke, Susan, about Chuck Schumer, and it was us with Blaine. Me, you, and Blaine Holt, and we were talking about, well, what if Schumer is the key guy to fork in the Democratic Party? And it's very possible because Gang of Eight member, he knows what intelligence Trump gave him, and before the war, and with Iran, the strikes on Iran, whatever you want to call it. What if Trump has handed Chuck Schumer the Golden Bridge to save face and retreat across? Meaning that when this is all over and Trump comes out and is able to explain to everybody why he had to do what he did, and this is why yesterday's ballistic missile attack on Diego Garcia is so important, because I'm like, Iran, you're done. But why would you shoot that missile off?
I didn't even see that.
You just validated Trump's statement that they exist as a nuclear. I'm like, to me, it's like, I took one look at it this morning. When I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's the most brilliant piece of statecraft right now, ever. Iran just gave Trump all the justification, which counters, sadly, what Joe Kent just said. And for the record, having spoken to Colonel Watkins, having spoken to EM, having spoken to Blaine and everybody, I have no opinion on Joe Kent. at this point. I am absolutely still in the 72-hour mode.
Sure.
I don't know and I don't care. And I'm taking the man at face value and what he said.
Sure.
Period. As you guys said the other day, read his resignation letter very carefully, because there's a lot to unpack in there. But if there is an imminent threat, Iran just made that case for Donald Trump.
They shot it at Diego Garcia.
They said they shot it at Diego Garcia. Yeah, it didn't get anywhere.
Sure,
clearly,
Iran, yeah,
it doesn't matter that it didn't. It proves two things: one, that they have the technology,
sure,
even just to cobble something together, right? And two, that like they can hit Paris with that. NATO. So you blow up NATO's opposition. Say this. What's that? Oh yeah.
I said that out loud. Sorry.
Yeah. Did you use your outside voice? So by the way, sorry, but no, but it was to do. It then validates him calling into question NATO's unwillingness to assist him in what he did, or even better, to assist him in doing what needs to be done in the Straits, and all of the rest of it. And he did all that before the Tripoli and the other two light carriers, the LHA carriers that are bringing the Marines in to theater. He did it all within the time frame it took for them to sail from Osaka to here, or wherever they were, Okinawa to here. Like, you understand how quickly this has happened. And it's an immense piece of statecraft. And if this then validates what we saw from Iran last year at the end of the 12-day war, which is, and I'm going to keep saying what I said then is now, which is that we did actually bomb the crap out of Fort Howe, bomb the crap out of Natanz, left Isfahan because that's where all the freaking nuclear material is, and we don't want to turn Iran into a nuclear wasteland, into a radioactive wasteland, right? And we did that, and then we also allowed them the ability to, lob some missiles at us, which we caught, and get out of this whole thing. Did we not just see that yesterday? I'm asking a simple question. It may not be true. 48 hours from now, I might sound like a lunatic. Maybe not. Maybe in 48 hours, it's all going to be over. And the way Trump is acting, Trump is not acting like a guy who's not in control of the situation at all. He's acting like a guy who's like, this is all just going right now. This is going better than I ever expected it to go. And my biggest worry at this point is that it's almost a little too easy, because if he really does have that powerful a military and he does have this huge asymmetric strategic advantage, let's hope he doesn't overuse it and overplay.
Start smacking everything.
That's the Messianic. I don't want to see the Messianic complex show up. I want to see him back down from here, do what he has done before, which is negotiate, have a deal, and this way now, if he has control of the Straits, now he can choose who in Iran gets the money from the oil, as opposed to the people who have been getting the money for the oil. And you'll notice that the way the Europeans have been acting, they want to be able to be in control of where the money goes to, which is, of course, it's the model that we've laid out here this morning as to who the real enemy is and who we're really fighting. I don't know. You guys, talk amongst yourselves. That's what I think.
Why would they fire the missile at what is for Iran? Like, I get everything you're saying. Is it anger? Is it, I'm not trying to be funny, is it stupidity? Was it lower chain of command? Somebody just took the
statecraft, Tommy. Statecraft. It gives Trump the ability to be validated and now to open up the end of the war, because now he can go home.
You're saying that's why Iran did it.
I think that was a signal from Iran's civilian government or whoever's left there.
Okay, I got you.
See, that's what I'm getting at. Is this the best piece of statecraft I've seen yet?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, again, I want people to sit with it. Don't react to what I just said.
Yeah.
Don't, Luongo's crazy. No, think about it. Think it through. I may be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong about this, but you have to inject that idea in and then watch from that framework. If that framework turns out to be full of shit, fine. Then we know it's full of shit, and then we know something.
Yeah.
As a scientist, you have to rule out the shit. It's Sherlock Holmes. Rule out everything that's impossible, and only the truth remains. Right. So let's start cleaving off things that are not true and getting rid of them.
It's faking being sick and calling your mom to come get you from the sleepover. You're like, ah, it's not my fault. I'm sick. Like, yeah, your friends can't make fun of you. You're like, she made the call. She made the executive decision, guys. I'm sorry. That, right? And that's kind of that's similar to right the whole like Maduro. Like, he doesn't look too upset that he
Yeah.
got. Yeah, he's like, oh no,
Did get thumbs up in
you
the
got me. Ah, oh no. All right, goodbye. Yeah, it's like, was he captured or did he have a Delta Force escort? They look the same, but those are very different things. Yeah, it could be that. I don't know.
It all depends on where the camera's placed when they take the shot.
Yeah,
Remember, folks,
it really is. Yeah.
this is when you study film and shot placement and camera placement, lighting and this and that and everything else. At the end of the day, like sometimes it's just that was the image they wanted us to see.
Yeah.
You know.
Colonel, Susan, you guys want to have the closing thoughts?
Everything they said.
I'm thrilled that we're able to have these conversations because I think they're very important to people. Obviously, none of us have classified information. We are sitting with years and years, decades of research into all, and every one of us has different perspectives that has guided our research. And I think having people like us together and sharing that research with everyone else is critically important as we navigate through all of this.
Yeah, and I'll just say what Tom says about hypothesis is really important. It's the talking heads and the pundits who pontificate that they know everything, right? As opposed to, well, this is how I see the world. And based on these hypotheses, this is how I think it's going to develop. Hey, test it.
Right.
When Trump bombed Iran for the first time, my hair kind of caught on fire. And then I calmed myself down, and then you saw, okay, wait a minute. So by the time we got to Venezuela, some of my friends were freaking out, and I said, I don't think so, because we already have seen one hypothesis play out, and here it is again. Now, obviously, this is a much more complex, much more kinetic situation than Venezuela. But I think, the point about hypothesis and just throwing ideas, but then testing them against reality, as opposed to some narrative or matrix or social media outrage world that you're living in. Please test them against reality, which is why I started with the national security strategy. He said it, he's doing it. Gosh.
Well, just to finish, and thank you both for that. The last thing I want to put in people's heads is the reason why this was so much more a kinetic operation in terms of size and scope is because, to Iran's credit, they were a real threat, and they prepared for the wrong war. And because they prepared for the wrong war, and they underestimated their enemy, they wound up fighting. They wound up playing a game that they understood. They understand chess. They're Persians. We're Americans. We play Texas Hold'em. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding when I say this. I'm dead serious when I say this. We play Texas Hold'em. That's our game. That's our national pastime. It's not football. It's not baseball. It's Texas Hold'em.
Such a
And well, if you think about it, right? And so what they did, what the British and the Iranians and everybody else they did is they played chess and they bound the world up in this like mess of a game. And everybody's like, oh my God, if I lose this piece and my whole strategy falls apart. Well, what if you by the way, we're not playing chess. That game's going on. You guys are playing that game, but we're over here and I've got a big stack and you don't have nearly as many rebuys as you think you are. I'm all in. What are you gonna do? Oops. Right, you're carrying the Doyle Brunson, and we just flopped ace, and an ace came down on the flop, and I always have pocket aces. You're always fighting against a set of aces, always, not trips, a set. Why? Pocket aces, whole cards, pocket aces, right? Understand the terminology. It's very important in terms of how the bet and how everything is laid out. America always has pocket aces when it comes to playing with middle powers. Now, with China and Russia, no, that's not necessarily true. But we're also finding out that they might not have anything ever better than a flush draw. But Iran was playing with the Doyle Brunson.
What's the Bismarck quote about God has special providence for, was it drunks, Americans, and something else? You remember that one where it's like
Yeah, no, yeah.
it's like every 10 years like a new mineral becomes world's most valuable thing, and then America stumbles on a 10 trillion cubic mile thing, and it's just like again and then again and again, and it's like it is kind of like, hey man. But I was gonna say, in addition to what Susan said about hypotheses, and this is taking me a long time and I'm still not good at it, is and don't put your ego on your hypothesis. Look at something you don't care about. Right now there's a seagull flying by. Does it shit or does it not? No, now it's out of view. It didn't shit. If it did, okay, whatever. You should be that detached. And I don't mean like don't care about things. What I mean is I don't get Tommy Carrigan welled up in that. I'm not saying don't understand this stuff, but go, you have a theory about this, that, and the other thing. And if it doesn't work, even if it's a very serious thing, Strait of Hormuz, war in the middle, if it doesn't work, let it go. Just let it go. And that's you'll think a lot more clearly if you don't go, well, I have to stick by it because that's my pet theory. Like, no, man, that's not gonna work. Tom?
Well, it's funny. Two things. I was I was a chemist for 20 years. So hypotheses every day. Nothing kicks your ass more than the physical world. You have a hypothesis about something, and 99% of all experiments fail. By the way, just the 1% that succeed, you don't get happy about that because the next 99 are going to suck. And then the other thing is, if you've ever tried playing in the capital markets, nothing will ever disabuse you of the idea that you have an ego and that you know a goddamn thing about anything than the capital markets. So go broke a couple of times in the capital markets, and then you'll be like, dude, I'm a fucking moron, and I breathe through my mouth and the whole 9 yards. It's like I'm dumb. So you have to detach yourself if you want to be successful at those things you have. And what I found is that I'm pretty good at this.
Sure.
Applying it here. I can't apply it in the capital markets. I lose my money. I lose money every freaking time. I'm terrible at it. I can tell other people what to do with their money. I can't manage my own money. I'm awful at it.
That's the difference between someone who is practicing a religion and someone who is being an objective observer.
Mhm.
The response of most of these people, it has become a religion with them. And they cannot detach themselves, as Tommy was just articulating. They're too deep.
Yeah. Just
Stay away from those people.
Or they're running an operation on you.
Yeah,
No,
or that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, which is the same,
It's their religion. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah. Okay, fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's their religion.
There's the honest actor, the person who wants to believe that Iran was our existential threat and that this is a big Thucydides trap. There are a lot of people out there that believe that and has become their religion in some ways, and they are useful idiots for those who have an agenda.
Yes, absolutely.
We'll pin it there. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Everybody listening, please go in the description. Links to Rumbles, YouTube, Patreon, Substacks, all the good stuff. I'm missing something, I'm sure I did, and it'll be in there though. So Susan, Colonel Watkins, Colonel Luongo, thank you, Dr. Luongo. Thank you so much for y'all's time. It was, as always, I genuinely appreciate the time out of your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right,
You guys
guys.
have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you for watching, everybody.